Hello, how are you? Hello everybody, live again on ArtCat. So we're going live now on Instagram and Twitch and Facebook and YouTube all at the same time. So yes, here we are today. So thanks for joining us and good to see you. And if you are joining us for the first time, you can ask any questions you want, any way, any part of the way through of it. You're more than welcome. So we've got couple of people joining us already over on Instagram, like Barney Storm and my son Ethan. Hello, good to see you. Belfast Beatnik, hello, good to see you. So I'm going to carry on from a little bit from what we were doing last week, which was when I was working on this painting about 2 years ago. It sat in the studio, been kicking around for a long time, and I kind of worked through some of the kind of problems that were wrong with the picture that I needed to change. And it's that kind of thing, isn't it, where you have a picture that you know is not working quite well, and biting the bullet and changing it. And there's a reluctance to change or paint over things that have worked okay or quite well in the picture, but you know, just in the wrong place and you've got to move them. And there's lots of things around the project of Mammalians. This is what the range of work's called. Not necessarily the concept or the idea of it, or the reason why I was doing it in the first place, but the execution of it. And the qualities of my painting weren't quite right, and some of the issues I was creating in my sort of compositions, they were kind of tripping me up, and I kind of came to a halt on them. It didn't stop doing artwork. I carried on doing lots of other artwork, but they kind of sat in the background. So I had 3 paintings on the go at a time. I finished one of them, which I was quite happy with. It seemed to work, and it was the first one I did, and it got me over the hump of starting that project. And I was all guns blazing. I was fired up. I wanted to paint them all at the same time. I started the second and the third one, and I kind of painted them in a little bit, and then painted this one to the next stage, and I was okay with happy-ish with it at the time. I knew there's certain things that weren't quite right, and there was a bit more work to do on it. And then it just sort of ground to a halt because I was starting to become aware of the things I needed to change. And I looked at some of my skill set wasn't quite there. I needed to change it. So basically, I sat around in my studio for a couple of years, and sort of the project itself kind of stalled and was put on pause. Over lockdown, got back into painting through doing the Sky Portrait Artist of the Week. It was a lovely exercise every week just to paint and not worry too much overly about my concept or my ideas about what I was trying to achieve. It was literally to re-engage with the process of painting and in the enjoyment of it as well. Also, I've been researching lots of different artists and reading lots of different books and seeing some of the qualities in other people's work that I really admired and something that I wanted to kind of achieve myself in my work. And it made me look at these pictures in a slightly new way, rather than seeing them as a failure and just not achieving what I wanted to achieve. I had to look at them as a way of moving forward. So I got back into painting them again. So I finished one of them a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if you saw it. You can see it on Instagram and all the different various social media pages of a friend of mine, Carly, who's holding a small orangutan, and she's also holding a baby orangutan. Basically, I'd worked through some of the problems within that picture as well. It made me re-engage with this one, and I started to repaint over certain things in the artwork. If I can spin you around a little bit in Instagram, so you can see a little bit better. There. Now, it's not perfect yet. There's still lots of things that I am changing and adapting as I work through it. I don't know if you notice the sky's got a little bit brighter because it gives the figure more contrast. It pushes the figure forward a little bit. The horizon line is softened, but it's also more level because it was kind of sloping a little bit. I've still got this kind of crossroads coming through. It's still not in the right position, and I was thinking about it this morning. I might actually change the positioning of this because I didn't want it to look so unnatural, like a runway, that I needed to kind of find its form and find its position. So I need to change these things as I paint them. I don't know if you notice as well the horse that's being held in her hand. Initially it was up here somewhere, which meant that she couldn't have physically possibly have held the horse in that position just from the anatomy of of a figure itself, wouldn't have worked. It kind of looked all right in the picture when I got to a certain stage, but there was something jarring about it, and it was the fact that the anatomy of the figure was wrong. It also made the figure look a little bit fake, but I wanted to look like she belongs in this landscape. So I'm working my way through it. I've reworked the face a little bit. This hairline up here is where it initially was. I need to drop that down a little bit just to give a bit of form and shape to her head. So where this is dark up here, it actually stops there as the top of her head rather than there, because otherwise it makes it look like she's got a large bulbous back of the head, and Julie doesn't. Also with the chin, I need to take that up a little bit. It's a little bit too long, and work on some features of a mouth as well. I've restructured the hand. Now the colours are nowhere near what they're going to be. This is more about of adapting your picture, and also where I changed the horse as well. I've got a better feel that this horse actually is sitting on her hand and is also stood on part of the forearm here. It looks more natural. I know it's a slightly surreal image because you don't carry horses in your hand, but this is the whole thing about the concept of it was that all these portraits are based on a conversation with people I know, and I was trying to get a likeness or a portraiture of that person, not necessarily just what they look like, but more so about them. And the only question I asked each of the people, each of my friends, was, if you describe yourself as an animal, what would you be? Julie's was a horse. I'll go into more of it when all of the mammalian pictures are done, and I can talk about them at length and go into some of the details as to why I've structured certain things certain ways. So I've worked on it to a certain stage. I've restructured this umbrella, which starts to look more like it fits together. It's a little bit longer on this side. This needs to come down a little bit. Some detailing, you can probably see it. There's still a ghost line of where the umbrella actually came down to about here before, and play around with the shape, getting that idea of this ellipse of the umbrella shape itself feels slightly more natural. The lighting itself is going to be adjusted, and so is the lacing effect, but it's got the beginnings of the kind of feeling like this slightly illumination coming out from underneath the umbrella and lighting Julie's head up, so there'll be more light coming up, being cast onto the top of the head, things like that. So even through this process, it's still an adjustment. It's still finding the structures and the shapes and the forms and the colours that work for this painting, and it's an ongoing process throughout the whole painting process. It's not a case of I have everything nailed down before I start. Part of the discovery is finding out the picture itself as you paint it, and staying tuned to it, and being able to stand back and observe what you've done, and also what you've painted that day, for example. So Angela, hello, good to see you. Good afternoon. You're over there on Instagram. So guys, if you're on YouTube, Twitch or Facebook and you want to join the chat, you can join in the chat. Type something, just say hello so I know people are sitting there and watching. I'll relate back to where everybody asks questions from. So this is where I've got to with this painting. Now I was going to do a bit more painting today, but I kind of watching me just paint and and ahhing about decisions as I'm making. That's very much like a personal process as you work on one of your own works. And I didn't think it's necessarily that interesting to listen to me going up, down, I need to go to the left a bit. So what I decided to do today, I did see on Instagram, don't know if you know, there's Treacle Art Supplies over on Instagram, and they had this, they've got a competition running basically at the moment. There's an image by Sean Cheetham of one of his paintings, and there's basically 3 paintings. You can have a go at painting it yourself, and you send it off to them. But I saw one of the images and I thought it's quite a nice image, and I would like to draw that at some stage. And so I thought, oh no, I'll do it today. So I'm going to work on that today. So I'm going to do a quick flip around of this painting and a drawing. The image that we're going to be using, I'll pop up on screen for the guys over on YouTube, Twitch and Facebook, which is let me bear with me 1 second. I'll show you in a minute in Scrum, if you can bear with me 1 second. There it is that one. So you're going to get to see it down here, sadly. So it's a picture, I think she's called, trying to remember, Kate. I think it's called Kate. It's a lovely, simple, deceptively simple image of a girl holding a coat and holding her hands up, but I thought it was a wonderful structure, and so that's what I have attempted today. I'm going to do it in charcoal, so you can see how I kind of structure everything out and lay it all out. It might not get finished today, it might not be in its refined state today, but I'll take you through the process of drawing it, because initially the structure is a lot simpler. As you get further into an artwork, it's much more nuanced, and I'm still making decisions on this, and I wasn't too sure whether that would be that interesting to watch that painting process. So if I will remove lovely Julie, Julie's going downstairs, and I'm going to work on some grey paper today. It's called Gunmetal Grey by Dale Rowney. I'll try and put it in a position that everybody can see it. There we are. It's a nice mid-tone paper to work on. Ethan, hello, over on Instagram. Let's flick that screen so I can see you guys. So you're over on Twitch as well, multitasking, Ethan. Yeah, so I'm going to work on this kind of gunmetal grey background. It's a nice mid-tone to work on. Ethan's saying over on Twitch, wow, the delay between Twitch and Insta is weird and big. Yeah. What you might not realise, if you're only watching on one social media stream, not like Ethan who's lovely covering sort of multi formats, is when you broadcast these things onto different formats, they have different time lags. So some it's like immediate, and in others it's like a 30-second delay. So you can ask a question. If we don't see it straight away, or I've covered it, don't worry. Basically, just fire away, ask your questions. Tell me what you're doing as well. I often think because of the, I don't say problems, but it's a natural part of the process where you question the things that you're doing and how you're doing them, and they may not achieve a certain standard that you want them to achieve, and it's how you get across or get over that hump. You know, whether you have a little tantrum, 3 brushes up in the air, you know, sometimes that can be cathartic as well. Just let it out and then carry on painting and drawing. But it's how you get across the problems of things that are not working particularly well. And I've kind of got to the stage now where the biggest thing is for me is not to judge myself too much. Oh, David Kassan, wow, well, hello, you're a big inspiration. So over on Instagram, David Kassan is an amazing artist and an amazing giving artist. I joined David Kassan's drawing class. Preach, I will. Yep, you are amazing. And a true inspiration, because not just of the quality in your work, but your attitude to how you work with people and with other artists, and your encouragement to how you can engage with people, but allow them to develop at their stage. No questions too stupid when you're in your classes. You're very supportive, and I found that an immense source of inspiration, and something I've really tried to adopt. So, not about me, it's your process. Well, this is what I really appreciate. So, thank you for doing what you do. I know Shana as well has done some amazing classes as well, so I really do appreciate it. So, thank you. That might sound quite sycophantic, but I did find David Kassan's work. If you haven't seen him, go and check him out. Go and watch his YouTube videos. There's an amazing quality to his work. It looks almost effortless for people watching you work. It seems to just flow from you. But I know there's a real analytical process going on. And what I find interesting is there's just a strong conceptual story behind the work that you produce, especially with the Shell Foundation and the work that you've produced with survivors from the Holocaust, which is an immense, weighty subject matter. But there's a balance to how you execute the person now and the people who they are now, and the joyous part of the life that was led on from what happened, and what you've captured in them is such a warmth and a life. So yeah, thank you so much for the work you've produced. You got kicked off, but hopefully you get kicked back on again. Just only got kicked off on Instagram. So yeah, pleasure to have you here, and thank you for watching. So we've got a few SJ, again, artists. I don't know if you know SJ. She does a Facebook page called Portrait Arts UK over on Facebook, and there's been an awful lot of support, especially during COVID, about how artists are helping each other out. I listen to loads of different podcasts, lots of different artists. Just not necessarily I have to agree with them all the time. Just the questioning's a good thing. Sometimes they might make a statement and I might have a difference of opinion to it. But what's really good is it makes you think. So hopefully this is something you can get out of it as well. That whatever process that you do, whatever artwork that you're producing, it might not be your portraiture, it might be your thing. You might be an abstract artist. You can kind of see, to join some of the dots together, that we follow a similar process in our work and have an aim for what we want to achieve in the result. And the process and the questioning and the dilemmas and the doubts and all the rest of it are very, very similar between each of us. So try and view it along those similar lines. Say today there's a competition with Sean Cheetham and Treckle Art Supplies. I don't know the artist particularly well. I'd look at some of his work and some beautiful qualities to it. The competition between Treckle, so they're basically saying, have a go at doing one of 3 of his works, and they're going to choose a winner for some art supplies, or I think it's an online class that they're doing. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be working on today. So no disrespect, David, I would have chosen one of your pictures to attempt to draw if I knew you were coming on. Maybe next time, you never know. And also Shana as well, David's partner, amazing, beautiful quality of painting, so check her out as well. Without further ado, I'm going to crack on with this. So as I say, Instagram, unfortunately you've got the poor end of, because you've only got one camera angle. With the rest of you have a slightly better picture up on screen. I'm going to slide this out and show you briefly up close what I'm working on. I'm kind of working from an iPad because the image I got is off the computer. So basically this is the image I'm working off today, and I thought it looked deceptively simple because there's lots of nuance and very subtle differences in tone in that picture, but the structure of it I was quite interested in. So this is what we're going to attempt today. I don't know if David's still with us. You don't have to watch David. I'm sure you're a very busy man and you've got more better things to do than just sit and watch me doing Instagram, doing the bad picture. I'm going to be working in charcoal, so I've got a range of different charcoal pencils and charcoals. I've got Natrum, General Pencils, Pan Pastel. This all came from David. When I was watching him do different demos and YouTube videos, I looked at the materials because I wasn't aware of them, and this has been again another amazing thing about the internet and lockdown, is that you suddenly get introduced to lots of different processes. You suddenly get introduced to lots of different types of mediums and different things to draw with, and these have been out for quite a while, but you might not be aware of them still. Pan Pastel produces like very handy, almost makeup compact style pastels, and soft, S-O-F-F-T, was it S-O-F-T-T, I can't remember which one it is, but use these like little palette knives with these little sponges on the end, and it's just really nice to kind of paint and draw with to begin with. And so this is basically what I'm going to do today. So I might be turning my back on you a little bit. Hopefully you can see that a little bit better on Instagram. I'll turn you around a little bit. You guys over on YouTube and Twitch and Facebook, if I move that down you might get a better shot that way. So I'm going to work out just basic placement to begin with, and the different structures. So I'm working off basically where the top of the head might be. I could break it down into the shapes of how big a head is within that whole space, and how far a chin might come down. These marks might change and move around a little bit. If I took, say for example, halfway down this page and looked halfway down my image, what would I come to? I would come to basically there's a part of a hand, the heel of a hand, so I know where the heel of a hand will be, about there, and from there I can sort of triangulate up to where be the bottom of the chin, and then back down again to the heel of a other hand, which might be, it's just slightly below there. So I can help myself out by just positioning things first. It's easier to move a mark on the page than it is to spend a lot of time drawing perfect lines of contours of face and then realise it's just too small or it's in the wrong place, etc. I can draw the structures now of where things are, so I can then look at, maybe if this was the bottom of a chin, where if this is the top of a head, the shapes that are involved and the angles that are involved, and again trying to keep them in line. So if I look at the edge of her hair and go straight down, I do almost come to this part of her hand. So if the hand is there, this is going to be then too far out, so I might need to move this out a little bit. I can move it along the same axis as that line. If I move that out a little bit there, it has to stay on the same line for the triangulation of the bottom of the chin. I'm using that bottom of the chin now as a centre point. It has a knock-on effect to this hand here, which might come down there a little bit. But if this is the hairline which drops out that way, and then the back of the head kind of comes down that sort of shape, and then this shape slightly angled that way, comes in a little bit where her ear is and drops down to where her jawline is, to about there. I'm going to put these in the marks a little bit heavier to begin with, just to kind of help you see them, because I know the screen resolution on camera shots etc isn't exactly your best friend. Kay Jameson, thank you for joining. Hello. And this goes straight up from this point. So it's very chunky at the minute. I'm not going to worry about that, because where the refinement will come is where things are kind of mapped in a little bit as you go along. So again, I did a small video a while back over on YouTube about proportions and things of a head, and it's very easy to get sort of caught up into the idea of the oval and things like that. But often when you're drawing a face for the first time, if you've got that formula hardwired into your practice, and then you're faced with some of these proportions or posture which just doesn't quite adhere to how you formally drawn an oval for a face that's looking straight on, or the circle of the black head. Sometimes these things don't quite fit, but what you start to be aware is if you can start to see those kind of forms as a three-dimensional shape, you can move them around, you can animate them, you can twist and turn and direct them. So if her eye line is now not in the middle of her head because she's looking down, it's going to create more of the top of her head looking up. Just going to put that in there, a little bit there. I can play around with where a loose eyeline is going to be, and noticing that this eyebrow is just above this cheekbone. It creates a lovely kind of triangular shape that comes down here. The end of her nose doesn't quite meet her cheek. Put that in there, and then there's a shadow. I don't want to get caught up in too much detail just yet. This is more about just finding the spaces of where things are. Comes out here a little bit more as well. I've got a little bit too kind of small looking there, so I'm going to move her nose out. And then where her lips come, I'm just going to pop a line in there just to give me a general aspect of where her mouth is. There's a lovely shape just here, which would be the kind of the shape of her eye, not say the details of her eye, but the shape of her eye, and how that comes back up and back in that way. I'm going to map these in a little bit. Obviously this is a little bit more rounded. Again, maybe that's a little bit too low, and move that up a little bit. So we're starting to get sort of a basic, very basic structures of where the head is. Got a couple of people joined us over on Instagram, so Kay Jameson and Mariart too. Good to see you. If you've got any questions as well over on Instagram, Facebook, Twitch, feel free, jump in, ask away. But yeah, I don't want to get sucked into doing too much of those details just yet. There's a little shadow just underneath her nose there. I'm going to refine these, as I said, when I go around it a little bit, soften it off. Looking at how her hands are, so looking where the position of that finger is, it's almost in line with her mouth there, so I can pop a little line in just there. Helps me then to find out how these shapes kind of fit in. Now I might find that this comes across a little bit more and down this way, and then that one comes out that way, almost in line with the bottom of her chin. There's three fingers which kind of create that line there. The little finger goes off at this angle. So it's just angles, lines and shapes. I'm not worried about. Often we hear about how people they get very frustrated or fearful of specific things. So they'll go, oh, fingers are very hard to do, hands are very hard to do, eyes are very hard to do. If you don't look at them as things and look at them as shapes, it's easier to draw a straight line or a triangle or a 50p piece, or if you're not from the UK, a pentagram or a hexagon. It's easier to draw a shape than it is to draw things, and it takes away that kind of fear of what these elements are as objects, and you start to look at them as shapes of things. It's how they start to flow into each other. And so when I look at this, I'm looking at how her hand comes kind of straight down there, and then there's another line just underneath, and this line comes along that way. Now it looks very thin here, but you've got to remember this is in highlight and it's more of a shadow of the rest of the arm sort of underneath that. And then I can look at spaces and shapes of clothing. So there's like a V shape of how a arm goes into a jacket sleeve. I'll just play around with the shape of the other one as well. So that collar line is just about there, but there's like a funnel shape just underneath of a highlight, which is a neck. And I don't know if it's a small tip, but it's one of the things I kind of try to do. When I look at abstract shapes, so that highlight under her neck, again, apologies Instagram because you can't quite see it too well. It's like a funnel shape underneath her neck, an upside down funnel. If I see an abstracted shape of a light, I try and identify it as something else, which kind of helps me draw it. So I don't know if that will help you. It's like this upside down funnel shape is the highlight underneath her chin. As I soften this, I've got an angle there of her cheekbone, which comes down this way. This hairline is a little bit more that way. A little bit comes up that way. And her forehead actually slopes up and out that way a little bit. There might be slightly more to the top of her head. There's a kind of fluffy hair, kind of breaks over the shape of her skull. There's a lovely sort of centre side parting with just a highlight on it, which is quite nice as well, which sits out from the head, which is about there. Just gives a bit more shape and space to that hair on the left hand side, and over this side is a little bit more softer as well. And that helps then find out where this ear is. Again, when it comes to it, if you follow the bottom of the ear right the way along, you come to the bottom shadow of this eye. So you start to connect things as well. How one shape relates to another shape, how these things are spaced, how far they are away from each other. Your initial top and bottom and left and right dots of where things are can adjust a little bit as you go along. I'm going to pop this other hand in just for continuity. I think that jawline comes up there a little bit. So initially where I had it out here, it's now moved to there a little bit. So again, I'm just retraining my eyes to look at my object. There is almost a connection with that tip of this finger on this side and the tip of the finger on the other side. There's a slight angle to it coming down a little bit, and the space between this finger and that jawline, I'm looking at the negative space in between it just to try and help me see the space of where I need to put that finger. And then I can look at it in relation to, that's the jawline there. Again, I can look at a kind of Y shape and then put that line in, and then put this back of the finger in this side, which again isn't straight down, it's slightly angled to join it to the back of the fingers. How then there's this second finger almost meets the top of this finger, but it just stops just shy of it, but it's on an angle, and what that does is creates this kind of triangle effect. Now it's not a fully joined up triangle, but I'm trying to see shapes and forms within it that as a basic starting off point it's helping me kind of structure some of the other elements in it. So Crims Clams, good to see you. Joined us over on Instagram. So we've got this figurine. It sticks out a little bit further from that knuckle and this knuckle up here. And so this comes out a little bit further, and then it comes back in that way. Now that's part of the shadow, and then what's lovely is you've got lovely kind of triangular pyramid shapes for each of these knuckles now. Which then takes you up to this third finger, which is about there. Which again just drops down away. This second finger, the way it's painted looks like it's curved, but it just means where it goes up to that sort of finger joint. You get the second joint, and it drops down away from it. This knuckle comes down here to kind of follow it, and I've got the little finger which just sits back off the top of that place there. That's a little bit of a heavier mark. Again, this is just about structure, so I just want to put it down so you can see it a little bit better. It'll be a lot lighter when we get through the rest of the picture, but the general slope of the rest of these fingers come out at an angle and kind of meet up at a point about that far away from the base of this funnel shape that we had, which is actually the neckline that she's got. Then we have this kind of lighthouse kind of shape, which drops away that way. A little bit too thick. Might have to move that in a little bit. Down to the heel of a hand, which goes off in this direction. The back of the hand comes to a point about there, and all this is in shadow. But when it reaches the sort of the wrist, the back of the wrist, it then goes out this way to get the structure. Then we get the sleeve coming in this way, and there's a lovely highlight on that sleeve which takes it almost up to where I might have a bit there actually, yeah, just above this second sort of button that she's got going on. Now drawing these button shapes in, these might move as I refine the hands and things, but I can place them just as a small mark, just as an indicator about where they need to go in placement. They're not directly in line with each other because it's following the shape and form of her body, so the clothing that she's got on has to follow those shapes. The space and distance to the next button and how far away that is from the wrist here. So move that up a little bit. I'm on a spinny chair, if you don't even notice, but occasionally you see me kind of slowly kind of move around like that, so apologies for that. Again, this is just a kind of a fun working exercise, and it kind of keeps your mind tuned into the structures and the basics of doing paintings and drawings, etc. And I can work back on the clarity of looking at your artwork when I go and work on my pictures. So doing these little exercises in between doing a painting, I find personally quite helpful. And it might be that you don't have to do a full picture like this, it could be working in your sketchbook, but a little alternative drawing exercise or painting exercise as you're doing another painting, I think can really help fine tune your eye to your artwork. So when you look at it again, when you go back to your picture that you're painting, it might help you see how you're adjusting and lining things up, and how you're looking at forms and shapes, how you're looking at certain colours, etc. All the different elements that kind of go to make up your artwork. It'll give you a fresh set of eyes, which is hard to do by yourself. There are little tips and tricks. You can turn your picture upside down, you can take a photograph of it on a camera phone. All these things are good initially, but the actual process and structure and how you draw and how you see and how you actually relate it to actually drawing, as little exercises, they're really helpful. So occasionally do these little exercises outside of the norm of your artwork, as it were. I find a little bit could be quite useful. I'm looking at how these things are structured and laid around with each other, so just the slight change in different angles of these buttons really sort of donate themselves to the body shape, so they might adjust a little bit. See, I've done that kind of inline and it's actually slightly lower than that, so I'm going to move that to there. It is more in line with that vertically, so I'll move it across to there. And there's nothing I've done here I can't know about, so I'm not using these soft implements to draw with are really handy, especially working in charcoal, is that you're not engraving into the page too much, that if you've done anything on here you can take it off. If you're drawing with pencils, draw lightly to begin with, just marking out where your structures are, and then down. The space gets a little bit longer as it drops away. And this one's a little bit higher on this side, and it kind of almost follows the line of where you think her hips would be. So just say it's very subjective. I was looking just basically on Instagram, and the Treacle Art Supplies page came up with this image. I just thought it's a nice image, and I'll have a go at doing it. As a drawing exercise, you don't need to think about it too much more than that. You can see how this hand, or this elbow, comes out and then straight down about there. I'm looking at that button, that roughly placed button, as a guide as to where the angle changes. So this comes out a bit further there, and this comes down that way. It kind of disappears into the blackness, so one of the handy things about using the pan pastels is later when I can fill this in with a heavier application of charcoal, it will push all the lights out stronger. But I've got a guide as to where the edge of that arm is. There are little guides to her shoulder as well. We get a little indication of a very soft highlight. The shoulder comes out that way. It disappears into the darkness, but it creates a bit of a shape, and a triangular shape, of how that kind of comes down this way and then back in. Yeah, it comes out that way. And on this side it comes down that way, and then right at the very base goes that way. So this is all quite dark. Again, I'm only putting it in lightly, very gingerly, because I can change the structures of it. The back of her arm comes off in that direction, again disappears into the darkness, and there's a little bit of a thinner highlight of a jacket which comes down this way. Can't quite see the other side of a shoulder, but coming through a hand, this line that I've got coming down here is actually part of a collar, and then it kicks back over that way, A little bit of space in between the top of the arc and her fingertips. That way. And the rest is in quite a lot of darkness. So I can go back in and just have a look at, say, some of the hair shapes as well that we've got going on up here. There is a line which kind of follows around, almost around sort of where a hairline would be, just above it. Kind of slowly graduates up to a point about there, and comes back down again, but all that's in shadow. There's a triangle shape which comes down this way. Again, I'm just looking at shapes. I'm not looking at detail at the moment. It's like a rectangle, a diamond shape really, a flat diamond shape. And that comes across her head there and back up this way. So yeah, we're starting to get some of the structures there. This is a little bit kind of messy looking at the moment. We'll start to lightly block in these shadow shapes. There's a bit of glare coming off the screen of my iPad, so I noticed there's a bit of a line which comes just below that knuckle there, which is like a seam of her shoulder. All of that is in shadow. All this is in shadow. This almost comes straight down this way, this shadow. Again, this looks quite messy and chunky at the moment, but how that comes across this way is where the base of her elbow can disappear into the darkness as well. Very rectangular, this shape. There's a lovely kind of stripes, militaristic style jacket she's got on, with chevrons of a tunic, and then as that goes that way, there's a small one just behind it. So look at the space relationship to the whole space of her arm. Stops about there, and this one goes down a little bit further this way. But all of that is quite dark. So very quickly we're starting to get the position and structure of where she is. Emma McKee, how are you doing? Good to see you. And who else have we got on the Instagram? Alison Dale, good to see you. Locker Gur, and Scotty K, thank you for joining us. There's quite a few names that pop up on all these different social medias, and it's sometimes quite difficult to read them out. Slightly dyslexic, so when it comes to reading out names, if sort of dashes and kind of one name kind of roll into each other, it can be quite difficult to see it. So Emma McKee, lovely work that you produce as well. Am I right in saying you're also a model? I think I've kind of gone from memory, but I think you produce quite Kandinsky style feeling to your work. I think you're the same Emma McKee. Does that? I might be right, might be wrong. If I'm wrong, you can say. Take a slip of my coffee. So although I'm working from an image, I'm trying to get into a similarity to the image that's on the screen for you guys on Instagram, on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. Instagram, I'll just give you another quick highlights to what I'm working from. This is an image by Sean Cheetham that Treckle have put up as a bit of an art competition. It's a beautiful painting, and it's quite deceptive in its simplicity, and it looks incredibly detailed and photographic, but actually when you look at it, there's an awful lot of gestural marks and very subtle tones, which looks effortless in its painting style, but says an awful lot with very little. So there's an efficiency to the painting, and so it was quite admiring in a painterly way about visually what it is I like, and some of the aspects of that I want to try and get in my own painting as well. Yes to all, good. Gorgeous piece of the day as always. Thank you so much, Emma. It's really appreciate that. It's very kind of you. So I'm going to work in just blocking out some more of these shapes and styles of this hair. I want to start putting some darker shading and tone into the background, which might be a bit boring because it's quite a lot of it. But what I wanted to do is create a uniformity to it and a depth. What I'm not trying to do is create the dark straight away. I'll build that up. At the minute I'm more interested in is just my structure. I can make this go darker later on, but as I bring all this darkness around, it'll make the light stand out a little bit more, and then I can go back in and refine it. I can use a rubber to sort of carve and structure it, and it's a very sculptural way of painting and drawing actually. I think the back of her head needs to come up a little bit, so when it comes to that, I'm going to leave that mark just about there. Then look at where this hand is in relationship to the back of her head. So again, just blocking this out. Now, if you ever watch David Kassan do this, he does it so beautifully. There's such an even application, which is experience, I think. It's something you can build on, and I'm still picking these things up. Even though I'm a professional artist, I'm still learning, I'm still engaging with the process of developing my own sensitivity to how brushes touch a canvas and how you hold certain mark making equipment and things like that, whether it be a pencil or a paintbrush, or in this case a pastel applicator. Just looking at that ear, and that line comes down that way. I'm going to colour this bit in. It's going quite nice just about throwing paint or charcoal onto a page and not kind of be too precious about it. It's been considered about where you're putting these marks and lines. I want to kind of give a little sense of a structure to her arm, although we won't be able to see it later on in the picture. It just helps me kind of figure out spaces, what looks more natural. And this bit area down here as well. I'll quickly block all this in. Again, look, with this pan pastel you can go quite dark quite quick by putting a couple of layers over it, so you're not I know that I can put that into the background, but at the moment what I'm trying to do is just see where shapes are, and I can adjust them if I need to. So I don't want to necessarily go this dark in certain areas because I might need to adjust them. And if you're rubbing back and you want to create a highlight and you've gone that dark onto your page, it's very difficult to sometimes get to a lighter part, because rubbing out so much you kind of lose the lightness of the page. Which I think is always unique. Well, I think it's an accumulation of lots of different influences, and it's one of my strengths as an artist. I've always stayed open to how other people work and what I can pick up from different books, and learn different YouTube videos and things like that. And I don't know if you saw earlier on, if David might not be with us now, but David Kassan was on at the very beginning of the broadcast, and he was a huge inspiration to the way he worked. And I think where you kind of pick up little bits from different artists, you will end up making them your own. It's not that it's necessarily copying, because I think this goes back to back in the day where you used to have apprentices working with masters, and now it's not necessarily you're working with them on a day-to-day basis, but there are so many masters of art out there that you can dip in like a palette of artists and pick out the things that are relevant to you, and you adopt them and adapt them, and it's through natural process of you working, you will make it your own voice artistically. But you can always pay homage to where that inspiration came from, which is hopefully what I did when David Kassan came on. I don't know if some people might have gone, oh look, he's gone a bit shy because I am a fan, a fan of his works. But like when you meet somebody you really admire and respect and what they do, it can. Yeah, I got a bit starstruck. And he's such a lovely bloke. He is such a lovely bloke. So again, I just want to get back to kind of blocking this in. So working with like a negative shape. I'm not saying that David Kassan would necessarily work like this if he was to do this picture himself. Again, he's got a great sensitivity in how he handles his materials than I have. Just a bit clumsy when I'm doing this. I think I'm very much more of a sculptural painter and drawer, where I like to carve into my pictures and kind of use my rubber to kind of reform certain shapes and things. What's interesting is where this corner of the eye goes, it actually goes in back into the head, and it comes back out for the eyebrow, and then goes back in again for the top of the head just there. And so that highlight there would be put in underneath there. This is a little bit softer. That's a turn. And then it comes around this way. So I need to move that darker line out a little bit. But for now, that's okay. Move that out there. Straight up there. And from that point, it then comes back up to that point. From that point, it goes across that way, and there's a small kind of tuft of hair which goes over the back of the head, and a nice kind of dome shape. Now I was looking at this, the painting surface you can't quite make out on the screenshot, but it's got a lovely choppiness to it. So it's one of the reasons why I've not necessarily gone in one direction. I've kind of given it a textural element. I might kind of keep that in a little bit, I'm not too sure yet. So we've got a couple of other people join us. ZFCHF, is that Zach? Good to see you. Hannah Papa Anna. Hannah Pop Anna. Hope I said that right. Thank you for joining us. Who else have we got? Yeah, again, guys, if you're watching on YouTube and Facebook and Twitch, you're more than welcome to join the chat. Ask any questions as well. You know, it doesn't. It's not about me doing this demonstration and talking to myself in a room. It is about you and the work that you're doing in your artwork, and anything exciting that's happened. Do tell us about it, because the conversation kind of flows always a lot easier when there's lots of people chatting. So initially, from my initial marks about where the top of her head was, where the bottom of her chin was, in a relatively short period of time, I've managed to find a structure of where this figure is, and that hasn't felt like it's been too laborious. It's kind of more, and not so much intuitive, but I'm literally just allowing one mark to dictate where the next mark's going to be. Just giving a little indication to where that chin is now moved down a little bit. Can refine this with maybe a charcoal pencil later. I just want to block this bit in, just give a contrast to the shapes that I've drawn in already. This is the collar that I was talking about. It goes over in an arc, and so this is darker. So slight shadow which is cast by the heel of her hand, and I'm going to drop that button down a little bit now. If I just slightly tone that tunic down. This is catching the light a lot more than this area, so structurally it kind of is darker here. This is a bit lighter, and it slowly turns into this shadow. And there's a nice kind of shape as a fold. It's a floppy bit of material that comes from the sleeve as it goes over her wrist. It gives a nice sort of triangular shape to this area. Again, but don't get too distracted. I'm going to just block in this area as well. So yeah, tell me how your last artwork has gone. You know, how did it work out for you? What problems did you have? What successes did you have as well? Again, I do talk about this quite a bit, that it's important to kind of acknowledge the things that are going well for you, as well as the things that you need to develop, because it's too easy to kind of beat yourself up in the process of when you're drawing and painting, to only concentrate on the things that are going not so well. And if you do that, it takes away your own enthusiasm to draw, because if you're constantly going into the studio or wherever you're doing your artwork and telling yourself off in the process, it doesn't encourage you to stay there. So you've got to acknowledge some of the things that work well in your works. Amy Lynn Brand, nice to see you. Josh joined us there on Instagram. So we're just doing a portrait I'll give you a quick update for the others who've just joined us of a portrait by Sean Cheetham, or Chetham. I think I might have mispronounced his name. So Trecolart Supplies have got a competition going at the moment. You can decide to do one of 3 of his works in your style. If you go to their website, you'll see it there, and then they're going to choose a winner, and they'll win brushes, I think, and there's a workshop as well. So I just thought it'd be fun to do it. It's fun to kind of have a go, play around, not have to worry about the conceptual side of it, and just concentrate on the drawing and the painting side of create a piece of artwork. So it's very much like an exercise, which is quite fun. That comes out. Oop. Just let you know, these little kind of sponges things, if you've seen them from Soft, they're like little makeup sponges. Stick on these little plastic palette knives. You can get them in different shapes. I quite like the triangular pointy ones because you've got a point and you've also got flat space to kind of put a large amount down, so they're quite a multifunctional applicator. Join all that together. So this is quite dark all over. So even loosely just filling this space in is starting to push this figure out a little bit. There are elements I need to kind of refine, obviously. Coming out of her arm here, which is the sleeve, because I don't think the sleeve is necessarily this wide. It's more kind of that shape. And so what's really nice about this this process is you can kind of cut into it and shape it and push it around a little bit. I haven't gone into any detail over a facial features. I literally put in the shapes and shadows, and I can soften these things as I go on with this further. I can darken this area down a bit more, and where the shadow of her face comes down. I'm going to soften this. I just use a bit of tissue paper just to take some of the charcoal and knock out some of the structural shapes. I've got kind of a good basic shape of where things are, but I can sort of tone this jacket a little bit by using the charcoal that's already on the page, softening some of my marks I've already got in there. Oh, that needs to be a little bit darker as well. Need to be careful because I'm also doing a painting, so I've got my palette set down here that I'm not actually setting my my charcoal tools down in my paints. That would be good. So this is a little bit more in shadow here as well. I can refine this chin a little bit as well. So what I'm going to use is my rubber or razor, depending where you're from. It's just a plastic eraser. I'm just going to take out, it might be a little bit too light to begin with, but I can go back in with that paper cloth and just rub back over it again once I've got the highlights in. Oh, I'm basically, it's not even highlights, I'm actually reshaping certain things. So where I've got these lines from where I initially thought where her cheek was, I'm just kind of refining them a little bit, so I'm taking them way back to the paper. And seeing how that jawline comes around. Now what's interesting is looking at things like edges, how soft an edges are, how sharp an edges. Often you get quite strong strong edges against a highlight that meets the darkness. But there's also things like the side of a cheek here where it's a softer turn, or it's not as harsh. So I'm going to soften this line that I've got here a little bit. Take that line out. I kind of know where that jawline is going to be now. I'm going to cut into what I've got here as a shape already. Just refine a couple of things. There's a nice highlight which comes down her nose this way, and this highlight goes up the side of her face. So just taking that a little bit away from, if I use, you can get these things as well from Tombro, which is pencil erasers. This one is a slightly broader one. I do use a pencil one as well. You can see how wide that is. There we go. So you can get ones which are quite thin, they're about that thickness. This is a slightly broader one. I just want to kind of draw, almost like I was drawing with the charcoal. I'm now going to draw some of the lights in, just to sculpt some of the shapes I've got here, just to refine it a little bit. That cheek bows out a little bit more than I had it. Highlight comes underneath the chin that way, and then back up this side about there. Again, benefit of this charcoal is that you can redo it again very quickly by rubbing over it. So I'm just looking at that highlight just underneath the chin there. And it allows this funnel shape that we had initially to get a little bit longer. I'm just going to drop that line down a little bit as well, just to lengthen the base of that funnel. That reminds me of a photographer I once worked with, and he was saying about how we spend time to get to learn the settings of your camera, spend time getting to know what the aperture should be, what the f-stop should be for certain lighting conditions. You do less editing and it saves you an awful lot longer time. If you take your time when you're drawing to consider your placement and line and structure and form, you don't have to spend so much time adjusting. And it's true, slowing down actually speeds up your work. I'm using it very much on a site size basis, where if I see a line that I'm kind of popping in, I'm allowing myself to move it later on. I could spend a lot longer considering the placement of those lines, but it would take it would be a much more boring demo to watch, because I'll be literally considering one mark against the next mark and rethinking about the structure and placement. I am slower. I'm not a fast painter at all when it comes to my own work, as you might have picked up from the mammalian portrait. I really sort of spend time in it. Even then I don't always get it right, but listening to a couple of artists on a podcast recently, that's the same for everybody. Everybody's in the same position, that you spend time thinking about it and considering it, and you think you got it right, and then you leave it. You leave the studio and you come back and you realise it's not in the right place, and you've got to move it again. And so there's a bit of a balance to it. Slowing down can speed your work up because you become much more efficient about the marks that you make. But it doesn't mean to say they're always going to be right, so you might need to adjust them anyway. So there's a balance about, you just put them down, put the paint on the page, and then adjust it, and allow yourself to make mistakes, that's okay, it's part of your process? Or are you trying to be like a sergeant and be much more efficient with your marks and considered about where things go? And it's down to flavour, it's down about what makes more sense to you as an artist. So I'm interested to find out how you work, how you paint. So do tell us. Guys over on Instagram, if you want to join in and just tell me the types of work that you went, I'm more than happy to talk about the style of your work as well. Kath Walker 97, you want a request to join in my live video? Was that done on purpose? Hello from Manchester, UK. I mean, I'm open to having a chat if you want to talk about your work as well. Do you want to join in? Let me know. If you want to join in on the chat, we can do that. We can do that on Instagram. Unfortunately, guys over on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch won't be able to see it though, because it'll just be over on Instagram. But yeah, I'm happy to talk about your artwork as well. What type of things are you doing? What type of things are you drawing? What types of problems are you facing in your artwork? What's your medium, your style, your flavour of your artwork? Who are you inspired by? Maybe you want to talk about that? I don't know. We've got somebody over on Twitch. Adrien over on Twitch says, I paint with the process of emotion with little intention. How do you feel about outsider art? I like it. I feel like an outsider. I think what's lovely today is there's no necessarily insider art. There's a nice coming together of different art forms and from different approaches of art and different backgrounds of art. You don't necessarily have to have gone to university and studied. You don't necessarily have to go to an atelier. You don't necessarily have to have gone to lots of art classes. That, purely the enjoyment of painting and learning and picking up and adapting and refining your process and picking up from different YouTube videos and broadcasts like this, listen to podcasts and how that can infuse your artwork and make you refine it, is very similar for every artist who's ever left art college. You're suddenly left in the world by yourself, and you have your own abilities to rely on, to develop and to refine, and there's no real difference between what you call outsider art and an artist, because we're all in the same boat. We're all kind of trying to tweak what we do as an art form and as a representation of what you do, about how do you curate that and how do you put it out there in the world. You think you're an art nerd, Kate Walk over on me too. I am a collector of all types of art materials. If you ever see me in an art shop, I can't stop buying art materials. Certain restrictions apply when it comes to COVID and having less money. But yeah, certainly when it comes to qualities of things, I don't mind spending a little bit extra quality if they do actually work. When it comes to erasers and rubbers and pens and pencils and things. But yeah, definitely I'm a bit of an art nerd as well. I think as an artist, yeah, you do. It's an indulgence into your own practice. So yeah, be as nerdy as you can be, I think. Adrian over on Twitch said, what inspires you to create? How you judge a piece when it's finished? Good question. All manner of things inspire me to create something. That can sound like a bit of a weak answer, so apologies if it does, but literally I can hear a conversation in passing walking down a street and it'll throw me an idea. And I think it comes back to the creative thought process and the creative, and it's not necessarily something that you're born with. It can be slightly attuned to it, but it's definitely something you can develop. You've probably done an exercise at some stage of brainstorming ideas where you write down a central word and then you do like a spider diagram coming off of it of things just pop into your head. But it's how you keep your enthusiasm and drive to do that, to make it into an artwork. So I will muse about stuff an awful lot and think about stuff an awful lot. I stay open, I'd say, basically, to influence. So And that can be from anything. It can be how my cat sits on a windowsill, to how a piece of fabric folds over a chair, how light catches it. In fact, the painting that I was working on, that I showed right at the very beginning of this broadcast, I had to take it out of my studio because I've got a studio at home, and also in the corner we have a dryer, and we put some washing on. I needed to dry the clothes. I had to take my paint out of the studio because I didn't want stuff to blow around and stick to the paint, and I'd put it into the kitchen. And whilst I was sat in the kitchen, the light coming through the window hit it in a way that kind of shone across it, which made me realise I need to lighten the sky. So staying open to your influence can help you create things, and that's, I'd say, this so an exercise that you can practice always, so you never lose that what can I do next. Kath Walker, you were saying you always do mind maps and brain dumps. Yeah, absolutely. Just get it out of your head and onto a page, and then you can cherry pick what's relevant to you. And it can be 10 years down the line that you open up your sketchbook and you see a phrase or something that you've written down, and you've just gone, oh, visually an image pops into your head, and that can be the new source of inspiration. The other question that you had there, Dream, was how do you judge a piece when it's finished? There's a lovely kind of slick quotey type answer that I've heard other artists talk about, that when you're creating your artwork, you surround yourself with all the sources of inspiration who inspire you to paint the way you paint or draw. So it can be cartoonists, it could be Leonardo da Vinci, it can be any manner of artists who've influenced you. And once you've answered each element of those artists in your artwork, they leave the room until you're left with just yourself, and at that point put your paintbrush down and leave. Now that's an incredibly slick, cool little answer, but I think you have to stay true to yourself. If you're not too sure what to do next on your picture, put it down, leave it for a little while, go and work on something else and come back to it, pick it up, put it back on an easel and study it. What do you need to change? If you're struggling to find things what to change, like you're not twiddling or fiddling around, leave it. It's done. Move on to the next picture. The next picture might be a better work, but because of the work that you've done for that picture. We can always look back at pictures that we've done, say back in the day, or even a year ago or a month ago. I go, God, I'm better than that now. I can do this. I can paint like this, or I can make these types of marks, or that wouldn't look great in this style. Then paint a new version of it. Don't try and repaint it. You let it be what it is, as a stepping stone on your art progression. If you're constantly trying to fiddle to a perfection that you're not too sure what that perfection is as an ideal in your own artistic journey, what it is you want to say and do in your artwork, and you're kind of fiddling on with it and you're not too sure what to do next, leave it. It's done. Move on to the next one. Now, it might be not done as in it might not be a picture that's ready for a gallery wall or ready for sale, but it's done its job in moving you on to your next picture, which might be ready for a gallery sale or a commission or something like that. So that's how I kind of judge that answer, if that helps. Thank you for that cheesy answer. Yeah, but it's rather better than me wondering if I've ever actually finished any art ever. It is a very cheesy answer. There's a bit of truth in it. Oh, well, you've got tech problems over on Instagram. No problem at all. Thank you for joining. Thank you for the questions as well. Good to have a chat. Yeah, it is a bit of a cheesy answer with surround yourself with all of your artistic inspiration, and as you answer each one of them, they leave the room. It's very poetic, and visually it's quite nice to think you're surrounded by your art gods and goddesses. They're kind of championing you as an artist as you struggle to do your artwork. But I think there's an element of truth in it, where if you're inspired by a certain way a painter uses colour, are you using colour in that way in your work? Is that something you actually want to try and do? If it is, do it. If it's not, don't do it. You can be inspired by certain things. Like I like Rothko in the way he uses colour, but I wouldn't necessarily want to paint a Rothko picture. I liked how he uses one colour that vibrates, so how how colours can kind of vibrate against each other. I quite like that, and how the edges kind of soften and break, and I might use elements of that in a picture that's quite formal. I might like elements of how Sargent has got effortlessly gestural brush marks, but they're really considered, and it takes you to practice those things. So I need to go off and practice on other paint pictures and things that I'm kind of just experimenting. So even pictures like this today, well, I'm not worried about them being for something, or they're not for a commission. They're not necessarily to win the competition that Jekyll have got on at the moment. But it can be about just the enjoyment of it, and that's, to me, the best bit, is how you enjoy your artwork, how you're engaged with your artwork. You're also asking, how do I feel about Pollock and the abstract expressionism in general? Again, I love some of Pollock's work. I love some good abstract expressionism. I think one of the key things is where people think, oh, it's just paint splattered around and anybody can do it. Not anybody can do it as well. If you to put that in as a Google search, just abstract expressionism, click on images, and just visually go through the thousands and thousands, you don't have to go through thousands and thousands, but just scroll down and just see one or two that stand out to you, that visually just look nice or visually are interesting. You will 9 times out of 10 pick an artist who is really good, who is a Jackson Pollock, and it's funny that they can say so much with a real directness of painting. It's not just about making pretty patterns. There's something else to it. There's a deconstruction to it. There is a rawness to it. There is an expression to it, and they acknowledge that in the paint marks that they make. It's not just somebody trying to con you. That I kind of think that some aspects of how we look at and view art has got to the stage of where we kind of just go, oh yeah, anybody can do that, and it's just a con, anybody can do it, and why is that worth £10 million? And that's, I like a picture of this and not that. It becomes quite tribal. And one of the interesting things about the internet is, or that I've noticed, is there is a huge crossover into different art forms. There is no specific line in between things now. There's no tribalism as such. That artists can appreciate the refinement of a realist painter has just as much abstraction in mark making. I mean, if you zoom in closely to this picture that I'm doing here by Sean Cheetham, zoom in to some of the marks that he's got, and they are pure expression. They're just about the paint doing its thing with the brush, and the gesture, and how one colour fuses into another colour to create a form. And that's just the same thing. It's just a different outcome. So yeah, I like it. I like all art in general. What I don't necessarily, I'm not necessarily tuned in, was when things become a bit slick and processy, where we'll hear artists going, yeah, I've done 50 canvases this weekend, and you go, right, are they any good? And they go, 1 or 2 of them really work, and you think, okay, there's something not right about the number of paintings that you need to paint as being the impressive thing. I'm more interested about the 4 that you did that worked well. Tell me you did 4 paintings, not 50. It doesn't matter how many things you're just knocking out or churning out because of a process. It's the ones that are hitting the mark for you as an artist. When you put them out on a wall, or put them into a competition, or put them on a gallery show, they're the things that are of interest. Because if you generally can stand behind your work and have that integrity behind your work, and that's the key, is finding artists who have a real integrity behind their work, have a real mission to try and achieve something in their work. That if they're producing that quality, they are going to stand out. If you're kind of following a slick pattern of things, and slick process, and there's no real involvement of you as an artist, it just becomes a bit flat. And before long, you'll be bored by it as an artist. But if you can, sometimes you can get artists who become trapped, have a bit of success, they have sales, have shows, and they've done a range of work in this particular style, and then all of a sudden they have to do lots more of them, and again and again and again, of the same thing over and over and over again, till the point is, yes, they can paint them all day long, but there's no engagement, and their work starts to tail off because it becomes sloppy, and it's not as interesting because they're not engaged with it. I think you can see an artist's engagement in the quality of their work they produce, and it can be a searching. It doesn't say it has to be a perfect painting, but there's a certain soul to an artist's artwork that has integrity, which is inherently read almost on a subconscious level by a viewer when they look at it and they make that connection. If the artist is connected with the work, it will connect with other people. Not everybody, because not everybody will necessarily like the colours that you've chosen or the style in which you paint or draw. And you can't necessarily create work for everybody. You have to do it for yourself. If you're answering your own challenges in your artwork, that's a good place to start, because it can often highlight areas in your artwork that you need to develop. You have to go back off and research, and you have to kind of play around with your painting tools, drawing tools. You have to make experiments and do colour studies, and it sounds laborious, but if you're engaged about what it is you're doing, it's so much more fun, because everything is like that kind of kid in a sweetie shop feel that we're talking about, being an art nerd, that you want to discover certain things in your drawing that you like. So yeah, hopefully that helps. A bit of a segue off of me actually drawing. So yeah, where was I? I was drawing knuckles and hands and things, and refining this with my rubber. So yeah, again, this is just my opinion. You're more than welcome to disagree. If you have a different view of things, don't mean to say that I'm right and that you're wrong. This is literally what I've kind of come to think about during my own art journey, and I'm not saying I'm right by any stretch of the imagination. It's a case of I'm still learning and finding out aspects of my own work that I enjoy and things that I need to work on. It is an ongoing process. It's never truly one finished thing. You know, each picture kind of throws you onto the next one. Just playing around with some of the shapes here. I'm going to put a little bit more shape into this eye a little bit, because I think it comes down a little bit more. It goes off that way a little bit more. So good questions though, appreciate that. That was Edreen over on Twitch. I think I'm right to say that. He does move on Twitch. So let's soften this whole face up again. And just replace where this eyebrow is. Just look at that as a highlight area, but how this moves around this shape of this this eye here. Come up the bridge of this nose, which is quite nice. Which kind of comes straight down. It's quite a strong nose, like a Roman nose almost. the other side of that nostril. So that nostril coming out this side. Okay, let's use that. So just using the charcoal just on the page there to push over the face. I can refine this as all day long just by lightly rubbing over that and sculpting and the forms and creating the highlight of where this, which can bring out where the shadow is underneath the nose. The kind of structures of where the top part of a lip is, how it then cuts down this way. That might be too low. Yeah, too low. Needs to go back up. So there's a lovely flexible quality to charcoal that you get very much in oil painting as well. That I find you can, put a mark down in painting that it's just not working, and you can pull it back off again and paint over the top of it. If you're working in acrylics, it's not as forgiving because once it's dry, it kind of stains the paper, and then you kind of have to paint it white again before you can paint over the top of it, and it takes a little bit longer that way. So there's a flexibility in oils which is really forgiving, and you have to be more exacting when you come to some mediums like acrylic. When you're using certain pigments, not on all of them, but when you're using certain pigments, they really stain the canvas or the page that you're working on. And you can't really lift them off because once they're dry, they're plastic, and you can't add more water to it and take it off. Whereas with oil paints, you can scrub it right back if you wanted to. So Adrian, you saying thank you so much for your answers. More than welcome. Keep the conversation going because it was some good questions. When you see you worked on you paint to process emotion. If you looked at Edvard Munch, did very much a similar thing where you look at the picture of the scream. It is about him and how his psyche was coming out, his emotions and how that feeling comes out, and not just in the character of the kind of Home Alone face going oh, but the marks and the colours and the textures that are in that picture tell you emotively what that picture is about. And it's a bit like, because it's quite an abstract thing to think about how paint can do that, but I'm making an equation with music. If you hit a sad note in a song, you know it's a sad song. If you hear a happy note, a sound, you know it's going to be a cheerful song. And that's a sound giving you emotion. So paint and textures and things like that can do the same thing. They're about a quality to them, and if you curate them right, that's what you evoke in the viewer, or at least you can communicate it that way. Who else have we got there? Somebody else just popped up. There's so much light bouncing through the window, I can't quite see on my Instagram who it is. Chat TX over on Instagram. Hello, good to see you. So yeah, so this is where we're at with this. I'm just looking at the qualities of line at the moment. I'm not thinking about the emotions of this girl holding her collar up. I don't know if she's cold or warm, or whether she's just trying to be cool. I don't know who she is personally. This is a difference between kind of working on something like this as an exercise and engaging with something like this as your own artwork. You've got more curation as your own artwork. It's about what it is you want to say in your artwork, about what emotive elements do you want to come out. But I did listen to a really good podcast and a chat, a talk with an artist called Vincent Desiderio, who is a huge font of knowledge, well worth listening to if you want to YouTube him and listen to him talking about trying to emote things through paintings, but you can't sometimes physically have that emotion as you're painting them because you'd never get your painting done. So you have to have a separation, an analytical approach to what it is you're painting. So what I mean by that is, he was talking about a painting he did of his son, which is an emotive subject, um, which is really close to his heart, but he couldn't have that emotion as he painted because some of it was technical. He had to stand back and put the technical drawing or painting down first to give an overall impression of the emotion. So there's a balance to these things, but sometimes, say for example with Jackson Pollock, if he was hitting his canvas with a bike chain to get a certain texture, he couldn't lay the bike chain down and gently press it into the canvas. He had to whack it to get the paint mark that he needed. And there's a certain energy which comes from mark making that sometimes you kind of a bit like a boxer gearing up for a fight. You have to psych yourself up to do certain things certain ways, but I'd say it's a balance, because you need to stand back after making that mark, to stand back and analyze whether that worked or not. And if you're making artwork, well, I suppose you can if you took a break and then come back to it to see. But if you're making work which is closely connected to your emotions about how you paint, there might be a textural quality to that which is lovely, but sometimes there's a separation between the painting and the concept of emotions, about how you're approaching emotions into your artwork. It's a balance. So there's no hard and fast set rules. Like there's no art police that are going to come around and kick your door in because you've broken the emotion rules. There's a balance to these things, and there's a different scale of different artists use them in different ways. So use what's best for you, but I still think there's an analytical process involved with creating artwork, that you need to objectively see what you've done and don't take it personally if it hasn't quite worked, to help you adjust so you can do the next picture better, if that makes sense. Who else have we got there? Moments in Brushstrokes. Hello, you just joined us as well. Good to see you. So we chat about artwork in general. So I'm live over on Facebook, Twitch and YouTube, and I'm doing a portrait of a picture by Sean Chisholm, who is working with Trackle Art Supplies. They've got a competition out at the moment. 3 pictures. You can choose to do either one of them, and you basically do it, post it up. Check out their page, they'll have all the details on it. I just saw the image today, I thought it'd be a lovely image to draw, paint, so I'm drawing it today. So that's what I'm working on. Who else has just joined us there, so we can't quite see? Is that Michael? Michael, hello, good to see you. So yeah, so that's what we're working on. I will continue to do this picture until it's finished today, because I'm kind of enjoying it, but I won't necessarily get it done in the time scale of this kind of stream, if you like. I'm just going to move that as I talk and draw at the same time. Sometimes you kind of get lost into your drawing. Yeah. I'm still looking at forms and shapes and how things move around a face a little bit. It's becoming a little bit softer now, which is quite nice. This comes down though, almost to the tip, and then curves around that way. And the nose comes up this way a little bit. So I'm using kind of forms and shapes still in the refinement. It's kind of the angles of things rather than the objects themselves. And once I get an approximation and a closeness to how one shape relates to another shape and how far they are away in distance and intensity of line and things like that, that's when they take on a likeness. So I don't ever draw a mouth. I try and draw the shape of what I can see. So where we're looking at this angle, that angle comes out that way a little bit there, and that angle becomes that little tiny highlight on the corner of a mouth, which helps me then bring that mouth in a little bit. So when I go back in with my edge, I can follow that line and just start to see how that affects the corner of that eye as it comes up. So it starts to take on the shape of the side of her face. It's a refinement of it. If I zoom in and move you closer in a minute, Instagram. So if I zoom in to that, you'll see what I'm talking about. So there's lots of shaving and chunking and moving around and refining it, but all of these shapes start to kind of converge to make a more believable face without necessarily trying to draw the perfect outline of a face. It will start to happen itself. So Instagram, I'm just going to do the same thing for you and move you a little bit closer so you can see what I'm talking about. So where are we there? So just talking about the size of this face, how refining edges and shapes and forms, now one form fits with another shape, you start to get a more believable face that has more representation of the image that I'm working from. But if I was to try and draw the perfect contour of her cheek initially, I don't think I would have got it. And if I would have drawn it in a very hard line, it would have been there that I couldn't quite get rid of it or change it. Once you do one thing on a picture that you think is right, it then has a dictation about everything else, and if it is slightly off, you're unwilling to move it later on. So keep your painting and drawing process as fluid as possible until you almost the painting starts to dictate what it needs, rather than you going, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. You can stand back at it and look at it and go, yeah, in conjunction, you know, I need to drop this finger down a little bit, I need to move that out a little bit more to lengthen this shoulder or darken this out a little bit more. The reflection into your looking objectively at your work will dictate what you need to do in it. So rather than trying to guess, you can see it. And it's a skill, you need to sort of keep on practicing it. I'm still practicing it. I'm not anywhere different from you guys at all. As you do it more often, the easier it becomes, I think, and a lot more flowy and free, that you're not kind of too beaten up if things aren't quite right. You can slowly build up your skills over a period of time, and if you're painting a lot, it'll happen quicker than you think, because you are literally tuning your eye through the process. I'm just going to take that little mark away from that cheek there, just fill it out a little bit. I don't know if I've got this nose maybe a little bit, yeah, a little bit too high. Maybe I'll drop that down a little bit. I'm going to use my charcoal just to shade in that top lip a little bit, because it kind of comes out almost to the very edge there, the corner of the mouth on the other side, but it's a lot straighter than I've got it. I've got mine kind of tipping up, and this is a lot straighter. Reason being that this corner of the mouth goes up from this point here, which gives a slight kind of wry kind of smile almost. So you can use a drawing medium and a erasing medium to kind of work in combination with each other to create the image that I want to create. It's much more playful. It's quite sculptural. They can add and subtract in the process of drawing. That's not to say that every artist does this, or every artist that I'm inspired by does this. I don't know if Sean Treaton does this or not. I really don't know. But as a process for me, I kind of enjoy it, and that's the best guide you can have. If you're engaged with what you're doing, if you're enjoying the process, it might be a good one to stick with. If you're finding it cumbersome and restrictive, then I would say maybe not. It's not to say that sometimes you kind of have to work through a process, so you have to go through a learning curve where you know it's going to help you in the end, but right now it's really tripping you up and you really have to practice it. That's a good thing as well, that dedication to get things right for you as a process. You might have to fail a few times in order to get the right result. I'm just going to move that line down a bit. I'm just changing the angles of those fingers on that side. Just re-engaging with this eye shape on this side. The other thing is kind of fashions of things. I was thinking about how I was actually listening to Dave Grohl talk about music, believe it or not, and he was talking about Billie Eilish, which sounds weird, right? But he related back to an early website, and that could predict, or supposedly predict, what was a hit record. And it would follow a certain algorithm and look at tempo and bass line and things like that, and plot it out on a grid, on a chart. He said they get these printouts, and on this printout would be all of these hits in like little clusters which have a similarity to them. Now these clusters could be seen as schools of music, because there'll be rock, punk, pop, rock and roll, swing, whatever. But that's not what made them hits. They have a similarity to them in a process, in a formula, as in they might have a certain beat to it, but not every band has every song of the same beat or same tempo or same bass line. But the hits that were in these clusters, and then it became, if you want a hit, do this. But often you'd have this little satellite of a one hit, not a one hit wonder, but a one hit which stood out above all the rest, which changed the face of music, which took music off in a different direction. And it's because they weren't following a formula that everybody else was doing, that they did their own thing, they answered their own questions. And I think that's the same for art. If you're answering your own questions artistically, your colours, your textures, your process, your subject matter, if you're doing your own thing, you'll start to be engaged with it, and people will start to engage with your work. If you're honest about that process as well. It's very easy to con ourselves going, yeah, I'm doing this because of some existential reason, when actually it's because you haven't got the skill set to do other things. It's okay to be honest and say, I'm not very good at doing other things. I'm in the process of developing them along with my artwork, and allow them to infuse, engage, and push your artwork better to a stronger place. But if you're following a formula to make artwork that you think is being accepted by galleries, competitions, the art establishment, whatever that is, you'll keep missing it. I think you might get a bit of adoration along the way because other people following a similar formula. There might be a comfortability in that, which is, again, can be cathartic in a way, and it can be helpful if you're surrounding yourself with other like-minded artists that you are supportive, but you're also encouraging to push each other's work to get better. That can be great, but often I kind of see, for example, if you see an awful lot of foxes being drawn because somebody's making a lot of sales in artwork, selling pictures of foxes, and you go, oh God, I need to draw foxes because that's a thing that people want, and what I buy, and I want to make money as being an artist. I will paint a fox. You will paint the fox, but it won't be anywhere near as good as the person who painted the fox for good reason. And by the time you've painted or got to the level of painting a good fox, everybody's painting hares. And you go, oh, right, I've painted a fox, why is nobody buying? Everybody's painting hares now, I've got to go and learn how to paint a hare. And you go off and you learn how to find the structures of a hare and how to do fur of a hare and what environment is a hare, and you spend ages trying to do that. By the time you've done a hare, everybody's painting ducks, and you're constantly on a chase of sale. That'll never work for you. Find the interest about what it is you like. Engage with what it is you're doing. What really inspires you artistically, and try and pull those things together, and find those other artists that are like-minded who doing similar things, and make that your tribe, if you like. If you feel comfortable in a tribe of other like-minded artists, but keep an eye out for the person who's just doing something amazing, because use those as a source of inspiration. That will really inspire you. That will really push your artwork forward. To me, that's a mark of a good artist, who might be following a certain particular material formula, but is saying and doing something else with it. That's inspiring. It's something interesting to watch. This isn't necessarily artistically inspiring. It's a process. It's an exercise, and that's what I'm viewing it as. It's just an exercise. I found the artwork interesting to look at. There's certain elements in it which I quite like, and something I want to try and adopt. But I'm not necessarily saying I want to paint like this artist all of my life. I'm using elements of it. And like was joined earlier on by David Cassan, how there's elements of his work which I really truly admire. I don't want to necessarily paint the pictures that David is painting, but I want to infuse my own artwork with some of the elements of what he does and bring them in to what I create. And I kind of suggest and ask you to try that yourself. It's an ongoing process. It's not something you can write yourself a list and have it done by next week. It is ongoing. It's part of a whole artistic process, if you like, and it might not suit you. I can't dictate to you about what you should and shouldn't do. That's up to you to decide. But if you keep your basic art filter open as to what's relevant to you, and fine-tune the qualities of artists' work that really truly connect with you, and try and find a place for that in your process of your artwork, that I think would be the strongest element to help you develop, because as I say, we're all in that kind of process. Doom13 over on Twitch is saying, is that Sean Cheetham? Sorry if you already said. Yeah, it is. Well done. It is exactly that. So if you go to Treckle, they've got a competition at the moment where you can have a go at doing one of 3 pictures that Sean Cheetham, is it Cheetham or Chetham? I'm not sure how to pronounce his surname, but anyway, you can have a go doing it, and they're going to choose a winner, and they're going to give somebody some brushes, I think, and there's also a live access to a drawing class as well about the structure of a head. So yeah, check it out and have a go. Have a go yourself. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be a like-for-like drawing of his work. You can do your own interpretation. So you could dress up and pose in this style and do a self-portrait of you as this picture called Kate. Or I think there's one called Burning Building, and there's one self-portrait of him as well, looking very Van Gogh-like. You might want to do a picture of you as Van Gogh. So it's not necessarily a perfect representation of his picture. I think they're interested to see his kind of your take on his work. You love his Alla Prima stuff. Yeah, I mean, just the process of how he uses paint, how much you can say with deceptively effortlessly a brushstroke, which is really considered and well practiced. You know, getting colours and the textures right, and how you can work certain shapes and things. So yeah, this is what we're working on kind of a little bit today. I'm kind of just chatting through the whole kind of process and concept of how I'm kind of breaking this portrait down as a structure and looking for shapes and forms first rather than getting stuck into detail. Allow the details to develop through placement of, you know, this basically is a shape that I drew, and I'm refining it down to create the illusion of a lifelike eye, if that makes sense. Where I can start to look at the qualities of a line, how sharp a line is, how soft a line is. You know, an area like this, which is at first seen as a dark shadow, but when you look at it more closely, you can start to see there's a slight variation in that shadow to create the illusion of the underside of a nose and a nostril, which is just about there. But overall, this is a dark area just above her top lip. And where that line comes straight down there is the darkest part. It's sharper. So there's a sharp area, and it kind of kicks back this way to give space. There's like a dip on the top of your lips called a philtrum. And it's kind of following that curve and then curves out into the rest of the shadow. But even the angle of that shadow lets you know that where that curve of her nostril is on the other side. So drawing the shadow shape has given me her nostril rather than drawing her nostril, because if we did that and nose and nostril, that kind of wiggly line that you often see under sort of cartoons to give them an indication of the bottom of the nose, it's not there. So I am actually drawing what I'm looking at rather than drawing what I think I see. We've started to get a softness to that anyway, what I'm trying to say. And how that comes back down, that softens around the bottom of that jaw, comes in that way. So you get a real softness now with that face, without me having to draw a line to get the perfect contour. I'm allowing the shapes to dictate it. If I take you closer to Instagram, so you can have a see how that's kind of developing. Hopefully you can see that is starting to work slightly better. It's nowhere near finished yet, obviously. There's no really true refinement in that, but you can see in the process how in a relatively short period of time, because there's lots of me chatting and very little drawing, but how in a very short period of time you can move around your picture, shift it, change it, to be the picture that you want it to be, and it's a fun kind of process as well. We're coming up to 4 o'clock, so I do 2 hours for ArtCAD. So I'm going to end it here. I'm going to carry on with this picture. I'll have it finished today and I'll post it probably on Instagram, but I will actually highlight it again next week. I might be doing some more painting of the portrait that I am painting in the studio, and talk about that a little bit more. In the meantime, if you've got any questions and things like that, or if you want to chat about art and you want to send me a message, more than welcome, please do so. It's always good to bounce off people as well. Thank you for joining us on all the different formats, so over on Instagram, YouTube, Face and Twitch. It's been a pleasure, because it's always good fun to do this on Saturday. For those who are based in Northern Ireland, where I live, where the restrictions are starting to slowly lift a little bit, there might be some good news on the way. There is talk about possible real life classes with certain COVID restrictions in place happening at some stage. I know it sounds a bit vague, but we were contacted to go, would you be interested in doing sort of a day workshop, which I am, because I can't wait to get back to kind of doing these classes in life. I will continue to do this though, because I've made so much connections with other artists around the world. It's been amazing, and I've learned and grown so much in a year, more so than they did in the previous 2 or 3, because of connecting with people and going through the process of doing this. So yeah, fingers crossed. So Michael, yes, you saying yay, real life classes, sign me up. Absolutely, sign me up too. I have no more further details than that, other than where I'd be interested. I think it's a case of where we did try to do them, I think at the end of lockdown 2, or was it end of lockdown 1, they tried to start the classes back up again, and then literally we did one class out of a 10-week course and then stopped. And I think that what they're going to do is do a one-off day or half-day classes, and they're contacting all the tutors to see who's interested in doing it. I am definitely up for it, because it's about then you doing your work, and I don't have to do any drawing and painting, and I can just see what you're doing and get engaged with your learning process, because I really enjoy that as well. But yeah, as I said, I'll still be doing this, but I can't wait to get back into real life classes as well. So fingers crossed, we'll get those underway. And then at some stage I'm looking to possibly do online classes myself, not in competition with what happens in the classroom, because there's so much more engagement face to face, but there might be more of a curated thing. But I'm thinking about that. We'll see what happens. So yeah, fingers crossed. So that said, I'm going to sort of end all the broadcasts for this Saturday. I will be back next Saturday at 2 o'clock, same time, GMT time, over on Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, and have I missed one out? Instagram. Yeah, and all these different places. So yes, thank you very much for watching. Going to end the stream now. Catch you up later. All right, take care. Bye bye. I can't actually figure out how to switch. There it is. See, how do you switch in?